Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Ed. I appreciate you taking the time to sit in on this webinar this morning. I think from what I see as far as who's logged in, pretty much all of you either have Office 365 or are getting ready to go on to Office 365. And this particular webinar, I try to run about every 6 weeks or so for new people that are getting onto Office 365, as well as those that might have used it for a little while, even sometimes a long while, and you may just want to be able to pick up some more information about the various components of Office 365. Uh, there's a lot in Office 365. Most people's first exposure to it is their email. In fact, a lot of people think that's what Office 365 is, and it's a lot more than just email. So today we're going to go through that. Our agenda for today is going to be to talk a little bit about what it is, and I kind of already alluded to the fact that it's not just email. And sometimes some of the components we can get a little confused about what they are. Some of them are fairly simple components, so it'll be easy to understand what they are. In other cases, there's components such as SharePoint, which is a very useful tool for business. It's a collaboration tool and a place to store files in the cloud, but it's very powerful. And most of these components that we're going to go through, the Office 365 components, I do a specific webinar on pretty much all of them, and so we can, in most cases for those, even a 1 hour webinar for one individual component can be cramming a lot into a short period of time. So today we're going to go through a lot of stuff, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with each component, but I'll explain what it is. We're going to do a demo. I'll show you the various modules, what they look like and things. And then we can get some questions at the end. As I said earlier, if you have questions along the way, you can go ahead and ask them. You can ask them in the chat session, or at the moment I don't have the phones muted, so you can, if you have a microphone, you can bring your question right to as we go along here. All right, so as I said, really Office 365 is a lot more than just email. Office 365 is actually a suite of services and applications that Microsoft put together for businesses to use. The intent of Office 365 is to allow your staff and yourself to basically work from anywhere and get access to your data from anywhere on any device. That's pretty much the premise that Microsoft has in mind when they created Office 365. And at the bottom here, you can see that there's some circles with arrows in them. Basically, the premise around Office 365 is that you can use Office 365 to build things. So those things can be as simple as Word documents, but they could be workflow. They can be communication systems. So you'll see as we go through, you can use the tools to build the Office 365 up to whatever your company needs. We can organize things. So you'll see in when we get to OneDrive or to SharePoint, one of the things you can do with those is store files in the cloud, and you can organize them. With Teams, you can organize your teams, and they have access to their files and to their calendars and things like that. You can manage it through Office 365. We can control security and probably better than we can with in-house servers. And we can discover things. So one of the great things about Office 365, you can do searches for almost anything across your Office 365 tenant, which means you can, if you wanted to search for, let's say, normally you might want to search for documents that are related to a legal contract or something. with Office 365, when you do that search, you can not only search through documents, but you can search through emails, you can search through things that you might have in SharePoint, all different types of things. So the search function is a lot more capable in Office 365 than you would have on your with your in-house applications in most cases. And then finally, we can share things. And as we go through the demonstration today, I'll show you how you can actually share documents from, if you have documents stored in OneDrive or in SharePoint, you can share them with other people within your office, but you can also now share them with people externally. And when you share them, both internal and external, you can apply various security features to them that we'll talk about. So, as I said earlier, most people's first exposure to Office 365 is their email. And if you already use Microsoft Outlook for your email, lots of times when we make the change from either an in-house email server or some other network-based email server, when we make the change into Office 365, you may not even actually notice it because you're still going to use Outlook if you're on your desktop computer. So for those that are only using that, as I say, if other than the fact that you might have a newer version of Outlook when you switch over to Office 365, it's still Outlook, and you'll be handling your email the same way you always have, really. And with email, as you know, is email itself. It's calendar, it's people, which used to be called contacts, it's tasks, and it's notes. Those are the things that are in Outlook on your desktop. But one thing with Office 365, you can access your email many different ways. So you can access it through Outlook, which I'll call the desktop application. And through today's demo, we're going to be talking about desktop applications, web applications, and mobile applications. And because a lot of the various pieces of Office 365 will work across all of those environments. So with your email, you can access it through Outlook. You can access it through Outlook for Web Access, which is basically logging into the web from any computer. It doesn't have to have Outlook on it. You can access your email, your calendar, your contacts, and everything just by logging into Office 365 from basically any computer. I'll show you that. Phones and other mobile devices. So with Outlook, sometimes people, when they first get started with Office 365, with Office 365, they if they're going to use their email on their phone, they use the native mail application that's on the phone. So if you have an Android, you use the mail app on there, or if it's an iPhone, you use the mail app on there. But what you really should do in most cases is go to the respective app store and download Outlook. There is an Outlook app for both Android and iPhones or iPads, Android phones, Android tablets, as well as Windows phones. The Outlook app actually is a little more powerful than just your regular mail app. It's a lot more capable. It has your calendar built into the Outlook. It has your contacts right there. You can access if you have files stored in the cloud, you can access those through Outlook. So if you needed to, for instance, send a file. So you're better off using the mobile app if you can. And the apps are free. With Office 365, there's another module which is called OneDrive for Business. OneDrive for Business and SharePoint, which is another module, are similar in that they are both they both have the capability of being able to store your files in the cloud. The differences are, first of all, SharePoint is a lot more than just file storage. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the differences are OneDrive for Business is really for your own personal files that you might have. So if you have an H drive or if you use the My Documents folder on your desktop, the OneDrive would be replacing that. The difference is that your files would be stored in the cloud instead of on a server locally, or instead of being on your desktop, which is not a good idea anyway. So it's really designed around being personal file storage, although you can share files from your personal file storage with other people in your organization. And if the company allows it, you can also store them. You can also share them with people outside the organization. The other thing, now SharePoint, on the other hand, is more like your F drive, or some people have different letters for it, but it's the drive where you store all of your files on your server now, and you have different folders that you store things in, and there's different security on those folders depending on who allows whoever to access those files. That's what SharePoint would be closer to. However, we're going to touch on SharePoint, and I really do mean just touch on SharePoint today, because there's a lot that you can do with SharePoint. But there's a lot more things you could do when you store files in SharePoint than what you could do if you store them on a local file server. So as I say, we'll talk about that a little bit later. The other thing about OneDrive for Business is that there's also a mobile app. So again, if you can go to your app store and download OneDrive and have the ability to get access to your files on your tablet or on your phone. And the ability to do that is not only just to read it, but you could actually modify the files from your mobile device as well. So that's another advantage of having your files in the cloud, is that you can access them through any type of device from wherever you're at. And then the other piece that I was talking about as far as storing files is SharePoint. SharePoint is a platform. And what I mean by that is that SharePoint has you can think of SharePoint as an internal website or an intranet. And basically what it is, if you want to think of like a blank page with nothing on it, or a better description is blank pages, because you can have multiple pages. But then what you can do is you can plug in what we call web components into those blank pages, and there's all different types of web components, one of which would be what we call libraries, and libraries are where you would be storing your files. So you can have a document library, let's say, like you might have now, which would be maybe your administrative documents. So we could create a document library called administrative documents, and then you would have all of the folders underneath that particular library or folder, just like you would now. It would, if you have 3 or 4 folders with different files in them, it will look and act the same way. And you'll see when we do the demo, it looks the same way. But there's much more capabilities with the files that once they're in the cloud. First of all, you are able to access these files through your mobile devices, or through your laptop, or through your workstation, or even just logging into the web. You are able to get to these files, even if you have a computer that doesn't have Microsoft Office on it. So if you had a Word document in SharePoint or in OneDrive, you could go to any computer, even if it does not have Office in it, and you can go to log into the cloud, into your Office 365 account, and access those files. And we'll talk about how you can edit those files as well. But some of the other high-end features that you can do with SharePoint is, first of all, as I said, you can share files out of there. It also supports what's called versioning. So if you have I always use the example of your employee manual, because it's kind of, I think all of us have one. But let's say you have the employee manual up in SharePoint. What you can do with it is, first of all, it keeps track of the versions. So if we created that document a year ago or 2 years ago, and over the years we've added things, we've taken things out, we've changed things, we can actually go back to any version of that document back years and be able to pull up exactly the way that that document looked back in 2015, let's say. Now, it's important to understand that that starts once the file is up in SharePoint. So if I copy a file up to SharePoint today, it doesn't know anything about previous versions. But once it's up there, and now we start working on it a year from now, 2 years from now, if we needed to get back to the original version of today, or a version from August of this year or February of next year, we are able to do that. The other thing you can do with documents in SharePoint is you can set what's called alerts. So if using the example of the employee manual again, right now, if you have your manual, on your local file server, usually what people do is you end up, printing the manual out and giving it to new employees, and then as things are changed, you either send an email with either the whole document or the document, the pieces of the documents that have changed. But you have to make sure that everybody gets the document. If the document's in SharePoint, you can actually have everyone set an alert on that document. And first of all, if it's shared, they are able to get into the document. It might only be read-only to them. They can't make changes to it, but they can get to it from anywhere. But secondarily, with the alerts, if something changes in there, they'll get an email automatically saying that this document has changed, and they can click the link and it'll go open the document and they can see what the changes are. So there's a lot more capability in that area. Also, there's an approval process that you can set up so that, again, using that manual, let's say, maybe 3 or 4 people have to look at that document before it can actually be published out to the workforce. Maybe you have the administrative people, you have the finance people, and you have the legal people need to look at it. So with the approval process, when you set that up, the document can be set out there, but it's only available to the people that need to approve it. And then once it's approved, then it is made available to other people in the organization. So there's a whole bunch of other things. We'll see a little bit more of them when we go into SharePoint and when we go into OneDrive. Another piece of SharePoint is it's kind of like a communications hub. So lots of times when I go into people's businesses, there's some type of a board on the wall, a cork board or something, with all kinds of little things stuck to it with, maybe birth dates or some award or some notes of what's going to go on today or whatever. With SharePoint, you can actually take that whole cork board and make it electronic. So you can have news articles regarding your company, or you can have maybe it's somebody's birthday and you want to say something about that. Maybe it's a birthday of the company. It's a communications hub. You can have any type of news that you want in there. You can actually get news from outside. So if you're a airplane manufacturer and you want to kind of keep up to date with the news about aerospace manufacturing, you actually have the ability to create as I said, they're all modules. You plug in a module, and that module could be looking at either Twitter or Facebook or whatever on specific topics like aerospace manufacturing or something. It's a data repository because not only will it store your files, but you can also create lists in SharePoint. And lists can be, lists sound like a simple thing, but in reality, lists you can do some pretty sophisticated things with simple lists. One of those is calendars. So in SharePoint, you can have multiple calendars. So maybe you have events going on, company events, or maybe you want to have a birthday calendar where everybody has their birthday on there. So you can have all different types of calendars and have them displayed in different places in your SharePoint site. The other thing you could do with lists is you can create your own list. So for instance, in our case, we create we've created a list for our open projects, and it's just a quick list so that once a week I sit down with everyone in the office and we go through the projects. And in this case, the list is just a status. It's not in detail or anything. It's just a matter of, kind of where we're at with it, when it's due, who's the project manager on that particular project, et cetera. So we created that list ourselves, and we can do all kinds of things with it. The other thing about SharePoint, as I said earlier, there's actually a mobile app. So all of those things I just talked about, the files, the calendars, the lists, you can access all of those things through your mobile device, the phone, the tablet, whatever you might have. So that's SharePoint. The other thing that you all have with Office 365 is Skype for Business. And Skype for Business is another very powerful tool. It can serve multiple purposes. So in our office, for instance, we use it for instant messaging amongst ourselves. Our office is small, but we're on 2 floors, and we each have offices, and so we're not all together. And we used to yell, and sometimes we still do yell upstairs or whatever to somebody. But with Skype, what we're able to do is we all have it on our machines, and actually you can have it, again, you can have it on your workstation, your laptop, your phone. Its ability to communicate with one another. So if I'm on the line and Andrea or Olivia needs to ask me something, they can Skype me, basically. It's instant messaging. It pops up on my screen, and I can reply back to them. So that's probably the simplest function of Skype for Business, is instant messaging. But you can expand upon that. So the instant message is just like you were texting, more or less, or doing Facebook instant messaging. But you also have the ability to actually do like a phone call amongst yourself, between yourselves as well. So if you have headsets or you have microphones and speakers on your computers that are connected to Skype, you can actually have an audio call instead of just an instant messaging. You can actually have an audio call. So if I'm right now, I'm not at the office. If I'm here, I could still do an audio call with anybody at the office using Skype. Some people may have already used Skype. Skype's been around for a while in the personal world. Sometimes people Skype with their friends and stuff like that. It's the same idea. The difference with Skype for Business is that it's all secure and meets all kinds, which is true of all of the modules in Office 365. They're all secure, and they all meet various compliance requirements like HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, NIST, basically all of them. From there, you can also do video calls with one another. If you have a camera, if you have a laptop or you have a camera on your computer, or you use your phone, you can do video calls with one another. So not only do you have audio, but you have video. Video, just like anything else or any other time you use video, the bandwidth matters. So if you're on a cell phone and you're trying to, in fact, most of the time when you're on a cell phone, it won't enable the video because it would be too slow to have any video of any quality. So sometimes it'll shut that off. But if you have the right, so like in our office or even between external offices, if you're on a high-speed internet connection, you can do video calls with one another or with teams, groups of people. And you also can do video conferencing. So you can do, like this webinar I'm doing right now, I'm using GoToMeeting, but you can also do this with Skype for Business. The only reason why I'm not using it right now is I'm more familiar with GoToMeeting, and I need to learn more about the video conferencing components in Skype for Business before I take it out in the wild. So I'll probably change over at some point. because it gives you some other capabilities. All of these modules are all connected together, so it just makes it easier. Like when you're doing a video conference, or even if you're just doing instant messaging, you can actually open up a document and you can communicate about that document, or even work on the document through the instant messaging or the video conferencing. So it can be very useful. All right, before I get into some other a list of the other components, are there questions up to this point regarding either Office 365 in general, or OneDrive, or SharePoint, or Skype? Okay, if there's no questions, we'll just plow ahead. So some other modules, and I don't have all of them listed here. You'll see it when we go into the demo. You'll see a little bit more, but some of the modules, there's a newer module. It's been around about a year. It's called Teams, and Teams is really what Teams is a layover in your Office 365 that allows you to bring a bunch of the components together. So for a team. So what I mean by that is, you might have a finance team in your business. So you have 3, 4, 10, 20, 50 people in your finance department. With Teams, you would create a team for the finance department. And in that team, that finance department would have their own SharePoint file storage. They'd have their own calendars. You'll see we'll be talking about Planner and some other things in a few minutes. But it could have their own plan, their own project plan, which is basically what Planner is. And you can bring in information from the outside world, for instance, Twitter, Facebook, and even connect to programs that you might be using that are on the internet. Different types of programs that people use, and it basically bundles it all together, and it's only accessible to those people that are in that particular team. So if it's the finance team, we define who's in that team, and they would be the only ones that can access the data. So we'll look at that a little bit later. And as I said, one important thing, or one thing that Microsoft is trying to do with all these modules, is make them available in the mobile marketplace, on the mobile devices, I should say. So Teams does have a mobile app. You can download it from the App Store, and you can update your information in your team right from your phone. You can view what other people are doing. One component of Teams is that it actually has what's called a persistent chat session, so you can start conversations in there, and they're persistent. So your team can go in and look at them anytime. They can add their comments on it. You'll see a little bit. We'll quickly go through Teams a little later. Planner is a module that is basically a project plan, a project planning tool. It's not a full-fledged project application like Microsoft Project, or there's others out there as well that are a lot more powerful, but usually a lot more, especially for smaller companies, they're much more expensive, number one, but number two, they're also overkill in most cases. Unless you're building buildings or something along those lines, usually project planning, the larger programs, are not useful for smaller companies. But that doesn't mean that smaller companies don't have the need to be able to do some project planning, and that's where Planner comes into play. You create a project plan. The project plan has buckets for different types of tasks. So I think during my Planner webinar that I do, we talk about creating having a birthday party. So we're going to create a plan for the birthday party, and one of the buckets would be, we need to find a location. So there's a bunch of tasks that would be in as far as finding a location, like we need to determine how many people we're going to have, and what kind of, do we need a kitchen in the location, and things like that. So in that location bucket, we put all of the components or all the tasks that we have to do to get the location. We gotta make a birthday cake, and of course there's all kinds of steps in doing that. So we'd have a a bucket for the birthday cake itself, and we put all the tasks under there, and we would assign who was responsible for those tasks. So that's kind of what Planner is. And again, there's a mobile app for Planner, so you can update your project plans and things right from your mobile device. Another newer application that has been added to Office 365 is something called To-Do List. To-Do List is exactly what it sounds like. It's a to-do list. Right now, I think it's been out about 6 months or so, and it's kind of basic, but it's still very useful. I find it most useful in this case. This is one app that I find more useful on my phone than I do on the computer, although you can use it in both places. And it's a simple to-do list where you can create different lists. And now, just as of last week, you can have so if you have a task that you have to do and it's on your list, you can have subtasks underneath that. And then as you complete things, you can check them off, etc. Very useful tool. The intent, Microsoft bought a company about I think it was about 3 years ago now, called Wunderlist. It's a very popular mobile application for to-do lists, and so they bought them about 3 years ago. A great app, and they now are integrating it into all the various components of Office 365. So what will end up happening, for instance, is in Planner, if you are responsible for one of the tasks in a particular project plan, that task would automatically update over to your to-do list. If you had a task given to you in the Teams program, in the Teams module, that task would come over to your to-do list. So they don't do it right now, but eventually all of the tasks from wherever they're coming from will end up coming into that to-do list. So you don't have to bounce between applications to work on your tasks. And again, as I said, there's a mobile app for that, and I actually find that that particular application is probably more useful on the mobile than it is on the desktop, at least for me. Another module that was released not too long ago is Forms. What you can do with Forms is create basically like questionnaires that you can send to whoever, to your own company or outside your company. Basically, it's a link. We've all probably filled them out. We get an email from somebody asking about the service or a questionnaire. Lots of times they'll use a couple different the software or web-based applications to create those forms. But in your Office 365 subscription, you now have Forms, and you can do those things yourself. I would say Forms is very useful, but it's a very minimalistic application. It's not meant to take over from some of the higher-ended Forms packages, but it's useful for some things. Stream. For those of you that may already have had Office 365 for a while, you may or may not realize that you always had a module called Video. And what Video allowed you to do is it's like an internal YouTube. So if we're doing this webinar today and we're recording it, we can publish that to our internal what it used to be called Video channel. Now it's Stream. Now, the difference is Stream is much more powerful than Video was. With Stream, you can post your videos, and when people play them back, they can play them back on any device, a phone, a laptop, a big screen, whatever it might be, and it will automatically resize your video to the proper screen size. Also, you can turn on captioning. So while the video is playing, you'll see captions, you'll see the caption like you would on TV. But however, the other cool thing with it is you can on the fly change the language of the caption. So if I'm watching something and I need to watch it, I need to see it in French, for instance, I just tell it I want French, and the captioning will be done in French. It also has the capability of if you record, for instance, a team meeting and you have everyone, in that meeting talking and making points, etc. With Stream, you can actually tell it you want to see what Ed Davis said, for instance, and it would just flip through the whole video to those points where Ed Davis was talking. So you could do all kinds of cool stuff with it. Flow is a little bit more advanced as far as who might use Flow. So what Flow allows you to do is basically create workflows. So maybe when a file is added to, let's say you're using SharePoint and somebody creates a new file in SharePoint, so there's a new file in a folder, you can create a flow that says when, something to the effect of, when there's a new file put into this folder, send a tweet out to Twitter. All different types of things you can do with Flow. Very powerful, but it's one of those things that I think you need to get more. You need to get a little bit more capable with the other components of Office 365. Then you use Flow to kind of tie it all together. There's another module that you don't really see that much anymore. It's called Yammer. Yammer, the best explanation, and we're not going to spend a lot of time with Yammer today, because Yammer, for me, it seems like it's much better. It's a great tool for large organizations. Smaller organizations, I don't see a lot of value in it. But what Yammer is, the best way I could describe it is, it's Facebook for inside your company. So each person would have a profile, and they can post, you can make posts on it. Other people can follow you, that type of thing, but it's designed for inside your organization. It's not for outside. Although you can connect to, there's different Yammer channels that you can connect to that are external. And there is a mobile app for Yammer. And then Dynamics, we're not going to talk about today. It's an accounting package that most people don't have, but it still shows up in your Office 365 tenant. And as I said, there's a couple others. We'll see them when we go into the demo. As I said before, we have desktop apps, we have web apps, and we have mobile apps. So with Microsoft Office, all of us are pretty much used to using Microsoft Office on our desktop, and that's still there. It's part of, depending on what version of Office 365 that your company has. Office is part of it or not part of it. There's two different ways you can buy it. But anyway, Office, as we all know, is Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. When you have Office 365, almost all of the versions of Office 365 include Office web apps. And what that means is you can log into your Office 365 and you can get to Word, you can get to Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and now Visio. Visio is an add-on, I should say. The rest of them are just part of it. Now, they're not the full versions like you would have on your desktop, but in most cases, to do some basic editing of the document, and even a little more than just basic editing, the web versions are just fine for viewing a document or for making some minor changes, etc. And those all you have to do is log into Office 365 and you'll have access to those. And then there's also mobile applications, and Office is the same way. So you can go to your app store for your mobile device, whether it be Android or Apple device, and download Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. They all have versions for your mobile device. So again, if you have, let's say, OneDrive on there, and that allows you to get to all your documents, now you can have Word, Excel, etc. on your phone, and that's how you can actually edit the documents, etc. I don't think I would take, and write a book on my mobile device, but I would certainly maybe do some editing of the book as I'm writing it on the mobile device. And actually, I don't have a lot of time to spend with it, but the cool thing about using these applications when you're using SharePoint is you have a couple capabilities. So let's take Word or Excel or PowerPoint, for instance, or OneNote for that matter. If those documents are actually, if they are stored in OneDrive or in SharePoint, a couple things happen. First of all, you can have multiple people actually editing the same document or the same spreadsheet or the same PowerPoint presentation at the same time. That requires that the document is stored in the cloud, but then you can have multiple people actually working on the document at the same time, and it's pretty neat. Each person has a little pointer with a different color for them, and as you can watch them type. And I'm going to do a webinar on that at some point. I just have to figure out how I can be 3 people. And the other thing about if the documents are stored in the cloud and you're using the current versions of Office, you'll notice that your save button is no longer there. So if you open a document from OneDrive or SharePoint, the save button disappears because it's automatically saving as you type. If you're using both files on your local server or on your local machine, and you're using cloud-based files from OneDrive or SharePoint, then when you open those files that are local, the save button will appear for you, because in those scenarios you do have to hit save to save the document. But if you open the document from the cloud, the save button goes away. There is a little indicator there that says it's automatically saving, so you know that you're in that mode. All right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to do a little demonstration. So I'm going to change the screen here. Let me just make sure. While I'm doing this, is there any are there any questions up to this point? I don't see anything in the chat, so we'll go on. All right. So when you log into Office 365, and the way that you log in is you can just go to office.com, and you're going to put in your email address and whatever your password is for your email. And as soon as you log in, you're going to see what's on the screen right here. So again, we're not going to go through, we don't have time to go through details of everything, but when you first log in, the main things you want to see is these are the apps. So here's your Outlook, here's your OneDrive, Word, Excel, etc. This will show the last recent documents that I've worked on, and I can just click on these documents here and open them up and continue to work. Most of the time when people are working on things, you're working on it over a period of time. So when you log in here, and it does not matter what type of device you've opened the document on. If you're using Office 365 and you open a document on your phone or on your computer or on your laptop, or you go to the web and open a document, all of these recent documents are from any device that you might have logged in from. Not only that, if we were, let's say, working on a Word document or Excel document, when you open that document, it'll take you right to where you were working on that document. And again, if you were, let's say, at home working on a document on your tablet, and now you're back at the office and you open it up, it's going to take you to the spot that you stopped at on your tablet. So it keeps track of where you're at across. You could do that right now internally, but it's only on the device that you're on. It keeps track. So that's generally a menu. Now, the other thing to be aware of is up in the upper left here, there's a little, people call it a waffle, but it's the app launcher. If we click this is another list of the apps. The reason why that you would use this, I'll show you in a minute, but as opposed to using it over here, first of all, you can, if you have more apps than are showing up here, you can click on the all apps and it'll show more. Same thing, these are your recent documents. And again, there's a reason that this pops out here, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll go into Outlook quickly because it's basically looks like Outlook like you might have on your desktop, except for this is in the cloud. Okay, so this is your Outlook, and you have your email, you have your calendars, you have your contacts or people. It's because they've changed the name of it to people here, and you can people frequently contact. You can people on your calendar today. It tries to help you out. So there's different divisions of people, and then your tasks if you happen to use tasks. If you use a to-do list, the tasks actually sync between here and your to-do list program. So if you work more in Outlook, you'll have them here as well. Now, you'll notice that when I'm in Outlook, I don't have access to all of my programs. So if I want to go to a different program, I have a bit of a problem. That's why you have the waffle. So we click here, and now no matter what app I'm in, I have access to my other apps. So I'm going to go to OneDrive. With OneDrive, as I said, this is personal file storage. So here's all my folders that I have, and within any folder, there are documents. Okay, and maybe other folders. On the documents, first of all, at the top, I can if I select a document here, this is where I could share it. I can download it to my computer if I wanted to. I could delete it from here, move it to another folder, copy it to a folder, rename it, and this is where I could set some flow parameters around it. And this is where I can see version history. I don't know on this particular document. Oh yeah, I guess I have several different versions on it. So here's a document that I've worked on since March. Looks like the 20th. I could go back to any one of these days. If I just click here, say I can either restore it to this, or I can open that particular version of it, or I can delete that version. Okay. Again, we don't have time to go through all of the details of that, but I could also take this file and share it. So if I go over here and I click, if I select it and click on share up at the top here, it gives me options, and these options are can be set relative to how your company wants them. But right now, when I go to share it, it defaults to being able to share only people in my company that actually have the link to this file can access it. And then I would pick who I want. I just put their names in. I can add a message if I want. And what will happen is they'll get an email that says, "Hey, Ed shared this file with you. You click here," and they'll, as long as they are in my company in this particular case, they are able to open the document. If they were to forward that email to somebody outside the company, that person could not open the link. But you also have options here. So if I select the down arrow next to that, I can actually share with anyone. And sometimes people say, well, why would you ever want to do that? Well, there are lots of cases. So I have a folder on my system that is public documents or whatever I called it. We have our support agreements and things that I don't care who sees it. In fact, if somebody calls and says they want a copy of it, I just send them the link now and they can go and access it from that folder. That's all they can access. And I can also make it so that they can access it, but they can't change it, they can't print it, they can't forward it to somebody else. There's all kinds of other parameters you can put on it. This is to share it to people inside of system support group. People with existing access. And what that would be for is if I already let somebody share some things in this folder, I have the ability to let them share other things in this folder. And then I have specific people. And with specific people, if your company has turned on the function to allow you to share it externally, you would select specific people, you would put their name in, and it would go, the link would go to them and they'd be able to open that file. Now, you can, when you do that, you can set it so they can only read the file or they can modify the file, whatever you want. But they will not be able to, again, if they forwarded that email to somebody else, those other people will not be able to open that file. So that's kind of basics on the sharing. And that's kind of basics on OneDrive. And again, we're just touching on it. There's a bunch of other things here that we could do with OneDrive. So as I said, we won't go through all the modules, but here's Word. This is Word for the web. So when you log in, it looks very similar to if you're using Office 2013 or 2016. You get these forms, which, by the way, is going to change in a little while. You will still be able to see the forms, but it's going to actually show you your most recent documents underneath. They're going to shrink this up a little bit. But anyway, if I go into a document, for instance, I'll just use one of these blank ones. This is Word, and I have my toolbars. I can change the toolbars, insert functions, etc. So I could edit this document. Again, the advantage here is I could be logged into any computer. I don't need to have Office on the computer, and I could still edit my documents. Again, I'm not going to go into Excel or PowerPoint. It's the same thing. OneNote, if you're a OneNote user, you have access to all your OneNote notebooks through the web without having to have a computer that has OneNote on it. SharePoint. I'm going to warn you when you go into SharePoint that it's very difficult for, I think, it's very difficult for somebody to look at these screens that I'm going to show you right now and have you make sense out of them, because as I said, SharePoint is designed around the way you want it to be. So if in your company, if we created a SharePoint sites, it probably would not look anything like mine. But when you first log in, these are all various SharePoint sites, or as I said before, they're kind of like internal websites. So there's all different ones that we have. Our main one is this one here. When I click on it, I go in, and remember I said there's different modules that can be plugged in. So we have a news module. So if I change, I created this article last month, I guess it was. These are all previous articles that I've created. These are most recent documents that people in my company have worked on. But these are now, these are the document libraries that I was talking about. And these are your files and your folders, or folders and files. So if I go into company document here, I have all these various documents. Again, I could just open them from here. I could download them as long as I have permissions. And you can have different document libraries. So this is the first one is our client documents. This is our own documents. You can have a OneNote notebook or more, one or more, plugged into your SharePoint. There's a whole bunch of different things you could do with SharePoint. Very powerful tool. If you have a company, even if you only have, I think if you have 3 or 4 people, I'm not sure SharePoint, although even there it could be useful depending on where those three or 4 people are. But if you have a company, even if you have 6, 7, 10 people, it's probably worth looking at doing some things with SharePoint, if not just to store the files there. But just realize that it's not just to store files. It's a lot. You can do a lot more with it. Teams. Teams is another one that it makes more sense once we create a team for your own purpose. Okay, in our case, in this particular teams, we have our SSGI team, our own team, which is everyone in our company, and then under there we have these are called channels. So we have to be working on our documents now. We call our document management project, and we've been in business 35 years. So how we store documents 30 years ago, it's changed. What we need in those documents has changed, and all of that. So we're just reviewing it all. And so when we first go in here, this is our persistent chat that I was talking about, or our conversation. So these are all things that, like Andrea said prior to the meeting, we should review this particular document. And here's this is actually a meeting invite in this particular case, but here's a document that's been attached to the conversation, and people can talk about it. Actually, that's a planner on here. So this is a conversation that it's persistent. So people can, if I wanted to reply to this, I just click reply and I add my stuff, and everyone else can see it. And you can do all kinds of editing with it, put emojis in and things like that. But the team also has a files. This, if I go to document management project, that's my planner. That's our planner for this particular project. So all of it, all it's doing is taking all those modules and bringing them together, and for the purpose of this team working on them. Then, as I said, we're not going to get into Yammer. Admin is if you're an administrator, which most everyone on the line is not. Partner is because we're a Microsoft partner. We have some other things we can do. Here's our planner. So when you go into planner, same thing. It brings up all the various project plans that you might have going on. And so let's look at this one here. Well, first of all, if I go back there, if I look at this, my current projects, there's a little graph here, and it tells me how many tasks are late, how many are not started, how many are in progress, how many are completed. Then if I click on it, it takes me actually into the plan. So this is my current projects. These columns here are what I was talking about as buckets. And then within the buckets are various tasks. Okay. And then I'm just selecting another project right now. I go, oh yeah, it's this one. There's not a lot in it yet. Here's what I was looking for. So there's various projects that are in there. So that's what Planner does. The to-do list, as I said, for me, the to-do list is more useful anyway on my phone than on my computer. But these are all my various lists, and I use this to-do list I'm a big Twitter person, so I read a lot of Twitter, and sometimes I'll read a tweet that I want to read later. I don't have the time to read the whole article, so I put it in here under this reading list. I have a to-do list. There's just a whole bunch of different things. And there's some pretty cool, I go right from Twitter on my phone. You can share, and you can share directly into the to-do list. It's pretty cool. So that's the to-do list. Forms, as I say, this is where you can build some kind of simple forms. I created this equipment order form just as a dummy form. So you have these fields, and you just like on any other form, you can add graphics in here if you want, which I did. Then this is the first question, and if you see the red asterisk, means it has to be answered, and you put your answer in here. When people fill out these forms, it all gets fed back in here, and you can look at the responses, and it'll give you graphs. It'll tell you how long the average to fill the form out. It'll tell you what department, well, in this particular questionnaire, it asks what department you're in. And so there's all kinds of analysis on those forms that come in here. Again, as I said earlier, it's kind of basic, but it's pretty good. All right, so that kind of concludes the demo. I know I went through a lot very fast there because there's a lot, as I say, there's a lot here, and any one of those particular modules, for the most part, I can spend at least an hour on, and with something like SharePoint, you can literally spend weeks with SharePoint to get things set up. But it's a very useful tool. So with that, do we have any questions at the moment on any of this stuff that's in here? What I suggest that people do is, basically, try logging into Office 365 if you haven't already. Poke around with stuff. Next week, I'm going to be doing a webinar for business owners and managers because basically considerations for business owners and managers for Office 365, which has to do with security and sharing and stuff like that. So that if you're a business owner or manager, you need to know, how to kind of what the implications are relative to security and stuff like that. It's all covered. It's all secure and everything, but it's good for owners and managers to understand kind of how it works. And then the following week, we'll be doing one on Microsoft Office 365 forms, where I'll get into detail of how you create forms and et cetera. Most all of these webinars that I do, I repeat every now and then. Beginning in mid-May or early part of June, I'm going to be offering a new set of webinars. These will still go on. These Thursday 1-hour ones will continue. But I'm also going to be having lunch and learns that will be half-hour sessions, and those will be more dedicated to specific things, like in Outlook. How do I turn off now you have a couple different, it's still in your inbox, but you have a couple different tabs for important emails and not important emails, basically is what it is. How you turn that off, or how do you add a signature, or how do you take notes using OneNote for a meeting that you scheduled in Outlook, for instance. Those types of things. There'll be more specific task-oriented things, and I'll send a schedule. We'll only do 2 or 3 items, sometimes maybe only 1 item, but there'll be no more than 2 or 3 items for that half-hour session, and we'll be doing those as I say, mid-May to beginning of June once I get everything put together. The other thing I would say is if anybody would like to pursue working with Office 365 further, more on a one-on-one basis, just let me know, and I'll get in touch with you and we can schedule something so that I can work with you and show you how to either a specific module or kind of come up with a plan of how you want to roll it out. Okay, so if there's no other questions, then we're going to go ahead and finish up. I want to try to keep you as much as I can on time. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to sit in on this. Hopefully you got at least an idea of what you can do with Office 365. As I said in the very beginning, it's a lot more than just email. So thanks, and have a great day. If there's any questions, go ahead and send me an email. As I say, the recording will be available probably by tomorrow. If you're interested, send me an email, and I'll send you a link to it. Thanks, and have a great day.